Kusile coal power station managers have availed of 3 temporary stacks. These operational units have been out of service for 10 months. Interim Eskom CEO Calib Cassim says the units should start firing by mid-November. The initiative is one part of the Generation Operational Recovery Plan, which aims to recover the energy availability factor by 70% by March 2025. Well, for more on this, we're joined by energy expert Hilton Trollip. Hilton, I appreciate your time this evening. Can you explain the significance of the temporary stacks implemented at the Kusile coal power station and obviously their role in restoring electricity generation to what would be good levels?
Good evening, Hugo. Sure. What happened at Kusile is about 10 months ago, Eskom management ordered the station managers to run the Kusile plant harder than was advised by the station management, and there was a build-up of sludge in a chimney. This chimney is a huge thing; it's 100 meters high, massive structure, and it collapsed. So what happened is that there was no longer a chimney for 3 of these units. Now, to give an idea of what these units, how big they are, each unit is. Now, I'm very careful with numbers because they can get very complicated. So let me try and keep this really simple. Each of these units that couldn't connect to the chimney is 800 megawatts big. And so what's happening is they haven't been connected, and the CEO has said that they will likely be connected in November. This has always been the plan. That might be happening a few weeks earlier. It's good to hear that they still expect it in November. And when they connected, the full size of each unit won't be able to be used because it's a temporary repair. So instead of 800 megawatts per unit, we will then have in November 2 units coming on expected, which is 500 plus 500, which is 1,000 megawatts. That's one stage of load shedding. So what's expected is one stage of load shedding by the end of November. Then during December, by the end of December, they say by Christmas Eve, another one is expected. So that's another half a stage of load shedding. And then there's some other technical details I won't go into. So essentially, we're expecting Eskom to recover the usage of 3 units that were damaged about 10 months ago, and we will be 1.5 stages of load shedding less. But we are still subject to the risk of between, at this stage, 3 and 6 stages of load shedding, according to Eskom statistics. So maybe we'll be going down to 1.5 to 4.5 stages of load shedding by Christmas.
Well, Hilton, the temporary stacks have been introduced to bring back inoperative units earlier. Now, can you discuss the trade-offs between using this temporary solution and waiting for a permanent solution?
Well, as you know, every stage of load shedding causes huge damage to the economy. So it's a trade-off between, and in any case, the permanent solution will be worked on once the temporary solution has been put into operation. So the benefit of getting this 1,500 megawatts on ASAP is to relieve the huge damage being done to the economy, and it will take. We don't know the budget, and we don't know the timing for the permanent repair. We haven't seen any credible analysis or facts around that.
So obviously, you raised some issues around. This would be a positive move in terms of it'll reduce load shedding by 1 stage to 1.5 stages. But environmental concerns have been raised regarding the use of temporary stacks. How might these temporary measures impact air quality and emission levels, for instance?
Absolutely. That is a huge trade-off. And in fact, people that study air quality and the huge number, thousands of deaths, and tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of severe health impact, asthma, the deaths in children under 5 in the kind of coal areas of South Africa where we burn a lot of coal. the leading cause of deaths is respiratory illness, and this is largely attributed to burning coal. So yes, but this is not just for this power station. This applies to Medupi as well, and all the other power stations, which, as it turns out, are also, Eskom has applied repeatedly for exemptions to air quality standards that they should be sticking to. So at this power station, if it kept on going, there would have been the problems, but there are much bigger problems from the other power stations and also from Sasol at Secunda, which burns probably 2/3 of the amount of coal that Eskom burns. Eskom burns 60 million tons a year, 120 million tons, and Sasol burns 40 million tons. It's a huge amount of pollution in that area, as anybody that lives there will know.
Now, beyond Kusile, there are several other ongoing repairs and refurbishments in the energy sector. How might these efforts collectively impact the energy landscape in South Africa?
So as far as the announced improvements to the coal fleet go, in the same announcement as the Eskom CEO announced the good news around Kusile, the Eskom chairperson announced that the work on the coal fleet is not yielding the kind of results that was expected. So the energy availability factor target of 60% has not been met. And in fact, the current EAF, around 57%, is lower than it was this time last year in June, July, August. So we're trending lower. So we can't expect, and we never have expected, those independent analysts amongst us, much of an improvement in the EAF of the coal fleet. So that's going as we expected, but not going as Minister Gwedi Mantashe said in December, that load shedding would be over because the EAF would be sorted out by last month, I think, by July. Similarly, the electricity minister has been very optimistic. So that's not going to save us anytime soon. Also, unfortunately, and I don't want to I'll end with some good news. Unfortunately, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, the other main saving, what's meant to save us from load shedding, is getting new generation capacity onto the grid. And that's the job of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy via the IPP program. And that has basically just stalled. It's not delivering. So that's not happening. But the good news for some is the privates. What happened is last year, the president, on Gwedi Mantashe's own version, his words, he said his arm was twisted and he exempted big generators from requiring to be licensed by NERSA, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa. So what's happened is private companies, big mining companies, big industrial companies, big commercial companies, shopping centers, also municipalities that are in good standing financially and well managed, have all been signing contracts with IPPs, independent power producers, to build new renewable energy power, mainly photovoltaics. And there's as much as 10,000 megawatts in process, 6,000 probably coming online, starting strongly in about a year to 18 months' time. What's going to happen there is, firstly, those big users will solve a lot of their load shedding problems. They'll be getting electricity much cheaper. It'll also be clean because it won't be associated with these coal emissions we were talking about. Also, households such as myself have been putting gigawatts of new PV onto our roofs with batteries and inverters, and we also will be sorted out. And this will also take a lot of pressure off the public system. However, the big industries, commerce, rich households will be sorted out more and more. But even though it takes pressure off the public system, load shedding, highly expensive electricity, unreliable electricity will remain on the public system, and this will affect the poor, the people living in municipalities that are badly managed, which are many, and the public sector as as a whole. So good news, the private sector is saving itself. Bad news, government inaction, especially the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy's failure to get substantial new generation capacity onto the system is going to continue to have a massive negative impact on poor households and the public system.
Hilton, I want us to focus on the IPPs, which you talked about a moment ago. Now, the City of Johannesburg has procured electricity from 4 independent power producers, and I think something in the region of 90 to 100 megawatts. And obviously that will come online in the next maybe 18 to 24 months. Now, just how much capacity is there for independent power producers on the grid in South Africa? I mean, is it similar to just how long is a piece of string? Or at some point, will there be more than enough capacity?
So it depends where. And the solar resources are mainly in the northwest of the country, the Kalahari, the sort of semi-desert areas. Wind is also Eastern Cape along the escarpment, some other areas. And currently the grid is concentrated where the coal-fired power stations are for generation. So that's in Mpumalanga in the east of the country. So the grid is actually not sufficient to connect enough renewables to fully solve the energy problem. And this also requires cooperation between the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy that is running these IPP programs, the public ones, and Eskom, because it's the Eskom grid and the DMRE runs the program. And this is one of the reasons the bid round 6 basically flopped, because they gave a whole lot of they ran a whole lot of bids where the grid had already been taken up by the private sector. So it is also crucial that we build that grid out as fast as possible. But in the meantime, for example, in Johannesburg's close to Mpumalanga, it can get IPPs close to itself. Also, there is still sufficient space on the grid for these small amounts that are coming on now, but it is critical. Once again, one of the things that government has to attend to incredibly urgently is to extend the grid. But in the meantime, I just want to repeat this, that there's a lot of space on the grid if there is the willingness for flexibility and coordination and cooperation to get power onto the grid. For example, in the northwest of the country, where there's a lot of PV, PV is photovoltaics, that's solar. That's during the day, but there's quite a big wind resource there too. So one could add wind turbines to those areas, but that hasn't yet been incorporated into the public program. But what I can see happening is the private sector being very flexible and innovative in getting power onto the grid wherever it can, and municipalities such as Johannesburg, Cape Town so far, signing contracts with these IPPs. You know, Johannesburg actually has a contract with an IPP for years and years and years. That's the Kendal coal-fired power station. It's been working very well. It's one of the power stations that works best since it was sold to the private sector. So I am for the public sector completely, but obviously we're going to have a proper mix between the private sector and the public sector, and basically government has to come to the party.
Hilton Trollip, energy expert, leaving us with light at the end of the energy tunnel. Appreciate your time this evening.